Hi, I'm Ems, aka On Deck and Wings, and I'm excited at the possibility of a live-action Warhammer series. And I'm excited to see what other projects will be used with the IP, since Amazon Studios are involved and they made a fantastic adaptation of the Fallout series. I love the Fallout franchise. I definitely think the curse of video game or even tabletop adaptations is over now, and we're actually getting good storylines being written and adaptations. And on top of that, Henry Cavill is a 40k fan and obviously respects the IP, and that's the reason why he left The Witcher, so I'm excited to see what could happen. Cavill's mentioned on multiple occasions about collecting and painting up Custodes, and even though I've been painting and playing Warhammer for the past 20 years, it's one of the few armies I haven't actually painted. This is due in part to the fact that Custodes have never really been an army up until more recently. This is because they tend to protect the Emperor on the Golden Throne, but obviously the threat to humanity has increased now. And obviously Games Workshop want to sell more miniatures. There have been a limited number of special Custodian miniatures in the past, which are these ones. These are very different from the new versions, and they have this weird magic mic thing going on. Anyway, I wanted to demonstrate to you the step-by-steps I would do with painting up a Custodian army quickly and efficiently. What I've been doing here as well, I've got this stuff called black tack. I've been using this to stick my miniatures down onto some handles. This stuff is awesome and I really recommend getting it. It'll stop your miniatures from slipping when you're painting them. I've also primed this model in black using Colourforge's matte black spray paint. I recommend priming your models in black when using metallics. And if you're curious about the painting handle I often use, this is from a place called A Case Shop. I'll put the link in the description below. It has various different toppers, including this corkboard one if you want to paint some stuff up in sub-assembly, if you're drilling bits into them. If you're on a budget or you're batch painting a lot of miniatures, plastic shot glasses can be great as handles. Just put some double-sided tape on there or some blue tack. I'm mainly going to be dry brushing, especially with the armor, since there's a lot of texture on there. Dry brushing is a really quick and easy technique if you're new to the hobby. You can buy dry brushes, or you can just use some makeup brushes. You can buy makeup brushes in a lot of supermarkets and stores fairly cheap. The first colour I'm starting with is Royal Gold from Darkstar. If you don't know about Darkstar, they're a fantastic range of paints which specialise in metallics. Another really great brand is Turbo Dark. They have this colour called Bullion, which is a gorgeous gold colour. But if you're following along for some inspiration, just grab whatever gold you have to hand. And a little technique with dry brushing, you actually do want your brush to be a little bit moist, so get a sponge which is wet, dampen your brush and then wipe off the excess. This will stop your paint from clumping up and being chalky. So when we're dry brushing, you want to put the paint on a flat surface, and then you put it onto your brush, and then you want to wipe away the excess. I'm using this on a texture palette. You can make your own texture palette, you can 3D print one, you can buy them, or you can simply just use a paper towel. So load up your brush, wipe away the excess, and then we're going to go over the top of the miniature. So when we're dry brushing, it will pick up on the raised areas and the texture of the miniature and just speed up the painting process. For the next step, I'm adding a wash. You can get some pre-done washes, so Reichland Flesh Shade is great. And you can use Guilliman's contrast paint, you can thin that down and make a wash out of that. And Darkstar also have a wash for gold paint, which is called Dickensian Shadow. Using a flesh wash over gold brings out this really lovely colour to it, and it has this reddish brown hue. And it looks a lot nicer than I would say using an Agrax shade or a Nun Oil. It has this warm richness to it and doesn't desaturate the colour, actually brings it out more. So I've just slapped it all over the miniature, and this will bring out the details in the recesses. So if you're following along for inspiration, you could leave it there, or you could highlight the miniature. So you can mix some silver and gold together, or grab a pale gold. So I've got a pale gold here from Darkstar. I've grabbed a smaller brush, so you want a smaller dry brush, a smaller makeup brush, or a smaller flat brush rather than the round tip brush. And I've done the same before, wiped away the excess on my texture palette. And what I'm doing here is I'm being a bit more precise with where I put this. So I'm just aiming for more of the raised areas on top, where I would use common sense to think of where light might hit this miniature. And this will just add a bit more contrast and make the miniature a bit more visually interesting. And I'm going to leave the armour there for now. I think it looks great as it is. Moving on to the next bit, so I've got a burnt red from Pro Acrylic, but if you're following along for inspiration, just grab a dark red, like a corn red. And I'm not going to be dry brushing this, I'm going to be painting this normally. When you're doing base coat layers, you want a consistency which isn't too thick or too thin. So I tend to test it on the back of my hands sometimes, so I wear gloves. And you want to just add a bit of water to your paint, so it's still opaque and solid, but it does have a flow to it. And when you're applying paint onto your models, try and do long brush strokes like this, so you can cover more of the model and you will have like less streaks on it and less texture. I personally think that red looks really nice next to gold, and it has this like regal look to it. You can wait until the first layer dries and then go back over with a second layer with the same consistency, just so you get a better coverage. After that, I highlighted the plumage, so I've got this bold pyrrole red from Pro Acrylic, but you just want to try and get a brighter red, like a Mephiston red from Citadel. Once again, I've thinned this down a bit with water. I've put a bit on my brush. When you're applying paint onto your brush, you want to get it about halfway up, so you don't want to get it into the metal part, into the ferrules, because you can damage the brush. And brush control is important, so make sure you test out the paint before you put it straight onto the miniature. Try it on the back of your hand, a glove, or on a piece of paper, so you're not loading your brush up with too much paint and you have more control. And I've not put it all over the miniature, I've just kind of gone for the highlighted areas. And this is the next step you don't have to follow, but if you want to add a bit more detail, I am mixing a red paint and a black paint together, and then you can thin that down with some water, so I'm making my own wash. And if you're adding paint out of a pot, a Citadel one, just get an old brush you're not too bothered about, load it up and add it to your palette or your wet palette. And I've just squashed some water on with my water bottle, but water bottles and pipettes are really great for thinning down your paint. I've gone for a smaller, thinner brush here, and I'm being quite precise with where I put the wash this time. So I've just got the consistency there on the back of my hand, it's more like a wash. And I'm just going for the recesses and the underparts, and where I think it would be darker. I just wanted to demonstrate here that there's nothing stopping you from going back over with previous paints you've used. So it's gone a little bit darker after I put that wash on, so I've just grabbed that lighter red again and I'm just reapplying some of it once again, just to add some highlights back in and to brighten up some areas. I've got some orange paint here, I'm going to mix a little bit of red into it. The people who paint Warhammer, the Heavy Metal team, Games Workshop, they always tend to highlight the miniatures when it's red with oranges. When you're doing a final highlight like this, like an edge highlight, you don't want your paint to be too thin and watery, so you have more control if it's a bit thicker. So just add a little bit of water to it. Don't put too much on your brush. And then you want to use the edge of your brush and drag it across the miniature where the highlighted raised areas are. And the brush will do the work for you that way. Moving on now, you could leave the edge of the blade gold, but I'm going to be putting a blue over this. So I've got Abyss Blue by Two Thin Coats. You just want to grab whatever dark blue that you have. I'm just applying this to the blades, nothing special here. Moving on, I added a layer of cursed blue. I've left some of the darker blue still showing in the recess areas. And for a final highlight, I've got a pastel blue, but you can just add some white to your previous blue if you want to. And I'm going to be edge highlighting this again, so as I said before, just add a little bit of water to this. You want your paint thick, but not too thick that it's chalky. And I've just put it on my brush here, and I'm using the edge of my brush again to catch the edges of the model, so it's a bit neater and tidier. And this is why brush handles come in handy, so you can keep moving the model around to get a better angle for painting them. I finished painting the model now. I'm going to be doing the base, so I have some sandy paste from Vallejo. You can bulk buy this stuff and it's much cheaper than the Citadel basing stuff. And you can also get Winsor & Newton modelling paste, which is like a sandy texture paste stuff. I do have one of those fancy paste applicators, but you can just use a coffee stirrer. I generally paint up my bases separate to my models, so it's neater and the paint or texture doesn't go onto the model. However, these were already glued down as a friend sent me these models, so I'm just going to do my best to apply it as neatly as I can. If you're finding your texture paste is a bit dry, you can just get an old brush and add a little bit of water to it. I added some tufts here to just make it a bit more visually interesting. You can always add a bit of PVA glue to the bottom of these to make them stick better. And then I thinned down some Black Templar contrast paint into a wash and put this over the base. This just brings out the details of the texture. And just as a last tip, if you don't already do this, you can neaten up the bases. Most people will use black paint or brown paint to the rim of the base, and here is the miniature completed. Here are the rest of the Custodes in the squad painted up. I think they look cool. As always, thank you for watching. Remember to enjoy your hobbies for yourself, and at the end of the day, they're just war dollies. If you want to support me, I'm on Patreon and I'm on social media, especially on Instagram. All those links will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.